The man who sat across the dinner table from me was a ghost, wearing my husband's skin. The vibrant, quick-witted Liam Walsh I had married was gone, replaced by a hollow-eyed stranger who did little more than move from the bed to the sofa and back again. 3 months. It had been 3 months since the layoff, and the silence in our small Chicago apartment had grown into a suffocating presence. It clung to the curtains, settled in the dust on the bookshelf, and sat between us like a third person at the table. "I made your favorite," I said, pushing the shepherd's pie toward him. My voice sounded too loud. A desperate, cheerful clang in the quiet room. Liam didn't look up from his plate. He merely nudged a few peas around with his fork. "Not hungry," he mumbled the words, barely a puff of air. The Liam I knew would have devoured this, his eyes crinkling with a smile as he teased me about my overuse of paprika. This man, this stranger, simply stared through his food, as if it were another obstacle in a life full of them. The rejection, both of the meal and of my effort, was a small, sharp sting in my chest. His once sharp jawline had softened, and a permanent shadow of stubble clung to his face. The expensive suits he'd worn as a senior analyst at Sterling Financial now hung in the closet like relics of a forgotten civilization. He lived in faded sweatpants and a gray hoodie that seemed to absorb all the light in the room, making him look even more washed out and defeated. I watched him, my heart a painful knot of pity and a simmering, shameful frustration. I loved him. I loved him so much, it hurt. But living with his grief was like trying to breathe underwater. Later, as the blue light of a mindless action movie flickered across his vacant face, I sat at the kitchen table. The unpaid bills spread out like a losing hand of cards. The mortgage, the car payment, the final notice from the electric company, each a paper and ink testament to our slow-motion collapse. My freelance graphic design work, once a creative supplement to Liam's solid income, was now a frantic, desperate scramble that barely covered groceries. We were sinking, and Liam wasn't even treading water. He was just letting the current pull him under. My gaze fell on a crumpled page of the newspaper I'd used to protect the table while I sketched. A small, neat box. Help wanted. The Gilded Lantern. Experienced servers for fine dining evening shifts. The Gilded Lantern was one of the most exclusive restaurants in the city, a place of hushed tones and clinking crystal, a world away from our dim, silent apartment. The thought of it was absurd, me a waitress, but the image of the red stamped overdue on the bills was more powerful than my pride. I couldn't watch us lose everything. I couldn't watch him lose himself completely without fighting back. With a trembling hand, I drew a circle around the ad. I would do this for us, and he would never have to know the depth of our failure. That night, the tension in the apartment was a physical thing, a high-frequency hum just below the surface of hearing. I tried again, my last attempt of the evening, to reach him. I sat on the arm of the sofa, the movie credits scrolling up the screen, casting long shadows across the room. "Liam," I said softly, my voice barely a whisper, "we should talk about a plan. Maybe you could start sending out some resumes again tomorrow. Just a few." He didn't move. He just kept staring at the black screen, his reflection a pale, distorted mask. I reached out my fingers, brushing the worn cotton of his sleeve. A simple gesture of connection. He flinched. It wasn't a violent movement, just a sharp, involuntary jerk, as if my touch had been a spark of static electricity. He pulled his arm back, his gaze finally shifting, not to me, but to the floor. "I'm just tired, Nora," he said, his voice raspy with disuse. The space between us, once filled with easy affection, was now a chasm. Just as I was about to retreat, defeated, his phone buzzed on the end table. He snatched it up with a speed I hadn't seen in months. The screen illuminated his face, his eyes suddenly sharp and focused. The number was blocked. His thumb moved quickly across the screen, typing a response I couldn't see. Then he stood up, pocketing the phone. "Going for a walk," he said, not looking at me. He walked out of the room, out of the apartment, and the click of the front door locking echoed the sound of my heart closing in on itself. I stood there in the silent, flickering darkness, feeling more alone than I ever had in my life. The ghost was gone, but the man who left wasn't my husband either. He was someone else entirely, and for the first time, a cold sliver of suspicion pierced through my grief. The gilded lantern was a world built on illusion. From the front, it was a symphony of polished mahogany, muted jazz, and the low, confident murmur of Chicago's elite. But the moment I pushed through the swinging metal doors into the kitchen, the illusion shattered. It was a chaotic ballet of steam, clattering plates, and shouted orders, a hot, loud, and brutally efficient machine. And for the past 3 weeks, I had become one of its smallest, most exhausted cogs. My life split into 2 distinct, opposing halves. By day, I was Nora Walsh, worried wife, and freelance designer, forcing a gentle smile as I made Liam coffee he wouldn't drink and sat at my computer chasing down clients for late payments. I'd ask about his day, and he'd give me the same one-word answer, fine. By night, I became a different person. I'd tell Liam I was going to a late-night co-working space to finish a big project, a lie that tasted like ash in my mouth. And then, I'd trade my jeans for a starched black uniform. My muscles ached in ways I never knew they could. My feet were a constant throbbing misery, and my mind was a blur of memorized wine pairings and steak temperatures. But with the pain came a strange, fierce empowerment. Each night, I'd smooth out the crumpled bills from my tips, 5s, 10s, the occasional 50 from a generous banker, and add them to the growing pile in an old shoebox hidden at the back of our closet. That shoebox was my secret victory. It was the online payment that kept the lights on, the check I mailed that stopped the foreclosure notices. I was holding our world together with cash and lies. And while the deception ate at me, the feeling of fighting back was the only thing keeping me sane. Liam never seemed to notice. He was so lost in his own fog that my late nights, my tired eyes, and the persistent smell of garlic and truffle oil on my hair went completely unremarked. He saw what he expected, to see his wife patiently waiting for him to get better. He didn't see the woman who nearly dropped a tray of escargot on a city alderman, or the woman who could now carry 4 sizzling plates on one arm. One Tuesday night, the restaurant was humming with its usual energy. I was weaving through the maze of tables, a heavy tray balanced on my shoulder when my blood ran cold. Seated at a 2-top near the kitchen entrance was Daniel Shaw, one of Liam's senior colleagues from Sterling Financial. He was a man we'd had over for dinner a half-dozen times. He knew my face. He knew my name. My heart hammered against my ribs. I couldn't let him see me. A single word from him to Liam, a simple, "Hey, saw Nora at the Lantern the other night," would detonate my carefully constructed secret. Panic seized me. I needed to disappear now. Acting on pure instinct, I faked a sudden racking cough, bending over the tray, as if I were about to be sick. A few nearby diners looked at me with alarm. "Excuse me," I croaked, turning my back to Daniel's table and rushing toward the sanctuary of the kitchen. I burst through the swinging doors, my lungs heaving for real this time. The head chef, a perpetually stressed man named Marco, shot me a furious glare. "Walsh! What the hell?" "Sorry, chef," I gasped, leaning against a stainless steel counter. Something caught in my throat. I stayed there, my body shielded by a tall rack of cooling sheet pans, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against the clatter of the kitchen. I peered through a small gap between the pans. I could just see the back of Daniel's head. He was deep in conversation with his dinner guest, oblivious. My legs felt weak with relief. I watched as another waitress, a seasoned pro named Maria, took his order. For the next 2 hours, I was a ghost. I asked Maria to cover his table, claiming a sudden migraine whenever I was assigned a party in that section. I moved along the far walls, keeping my head down, using other servers as human shields. Every time the kitchen door swung open, I braced myself, expecting to see his face. It was a tightrope walk of pure adrenaline. When he finally stood to leave, I was hiding in the dry storage room, pretending to take inventory of canned tomatoes. I listened to his fading laughter as he walked out the front door, the bell above it chiming his departure. Only then did I allow myself to breathe. Leaning against a sack of flour, I closed my eyes, the dusty air filling my lungs. The close call left me trembling. The weight of my deception had suddenly become terrifyingly real. It wasn't just about hiding a job anymore. It was about protecting a fragile lie that was holding 2 lives and 1 precarious marriage together. The night it all came apart began like any other. The Saturday service was a controlled storm, a relentless surge of well-dressed patrons with expensive tastes and high expectations. I was in the rhythm of it, moving with an economy of motion I hadn't possessed a month ago. My feet still ached, but the pain was a familiar hum, a testament to the wad of cash that would soon be tucked away in my shoebox. For a few hours each night, I could set aside the hollow man on my sofa and just be a body in motion, a person with a clear, definable purpose. Take the order, deliver the food, collect the money. It was simple. It was honest in a way my life no longer was. Around 900, the hostess, a chic young woman named Chloe, approached me with 2 menus in hand. "Nora, you have a VIP 2-top in Section 3, Table 12. Give them the 5-star treatment. They look like big spenders." I nodded, smoothing my apron. "Got it." Table 12 was one of the best in the house, a secluded booth with a view of the city skyline. As I approached, I could see the couple silhouetted against the glittering backdrop of downtown Chicago. They were laughing their heads close together in an intimate bubble of shared joy. The woman was stunning, long dark hair, a sleek black dress that shimmered in the low light. The man had his back to me, but he exuded an aura of effortless confidence. He wore a perfectly tailored suit, the kind Liam used to wear before his world shrank to the size of our living room. "A bottle of the Oenine Chateau Margaux," the man said to the sommelier, his voice a low, smooth baritone that carried across the room. He hadn't even looked at the wine list. I felt a pang of something, not envy exactly, but a deep, weary ache for the life Liam and I were supposed to have. The one where $1,000 bottle of wine wasn't an obscene fantasy. I took a deep breath, pasted on my professional smile, and stepped toward the table. I focused on the woman first, her elegant posture, the diamond bracelet that caught the candlelight. I uncapped my pen, my notepad ready. "Good evening. Welcome to the Gilded Lantern." I began my practiced greeting, flowing easily. "My name is Nora. Can I start you with—" My voice caught, then died in my throat. The words turned to stone. The man turned from the window to look at me, a polite, expectant smile on his face, and the world tilted on its axis. It was Liam, but it wasn't my Liam. It wasn't the broken, hollow-eyed man I had left on the sofa 3 hours ago. This man was a stranger. His face, clean-shaven and sharp, was alive with a vitality I hadn't seen in months, in years. His hair was perfectly styled. His eyes, which for so long had been clouded with a dull apathy, were clear, bright, and focused. He looked healthy. He looked happy. He looked like the man I had first fallen in love with, only sharper, more confident, more dangerous, and his hand was resting on the arm of the beautiful woman beside him, a casual, proprietary gesture that sent a bolt of ice through my veins. For a heartbeat, we were frozen in a silent tableau of disbelief. His smile vanished, wiped clean from his face, replaced by a mask of raw, undiluted panic. His eyes widened, the color draining from his cheeks. He looked at me in my cheap waitress uniform, holding my notepad and pen like a shield, and his carefully constructed composure shattered. The air crackled between us. The background noise of the restaurant, the clinking glasses, the soft jazz, the murmur of 100 conversations faded into a distant roar. The only thing I could hear was the frantic, panicked thumping of my own heart. The only thing I could see was my husband, my broken, unemployed husband, sitting in a restaurant we could never afford, dressed like a king, with a woman who was not me. The woman, sensing the sudden shift in atmosphere, looked from Liam's pale face to mine. "Logan," she asked, her voice calm and questioning. "Is something wrong?" Logan. The name was a slap. My fingers went numb. The pen and notepad slipped from my grasp, clattering onto the polished floor with a sound that seemed to echo through the entire restaurant. I didn't bend to pick them up. I couldn't move. I just stared at him, at this impossible, vibrant ghost, and the entire foundation of my world, my sacrifice, my secret job, my pity for him crumbled into dust. The sound of my notepad hitting the floor broke the spell. It was the gunshot that started a race, and my only instinct was to run. I didn't say a word. I didn't scream or cry. A cold, blinding white noise filled my head, silencing all thought. I turned my movement, stiff and robotic, and fled. I pushed past a busboy, carrying a tower of plates, ignoring his startled yelp. I shoved through the swinging kitchen doors into the heat and the chaos, my breath coming in ragged, painful gasps. The cacophony of the kitchen was a welcome assault, a wall of sound, to drown out the shattering of my own mind. Marco the chef yelled something at me, but I didn't hear him. I stumbled toward the heavy steel door at the back, the one that led to the service alley. I slammed my hand against the push bar and burst out into the cold, damp night. The alley air was a shock to my lungs, thick with the stench of garbage and stale grease. It was a brutal dose of reality. I leaned against the cold brick wall, wrapping my arms around myself, as a violent tremor racked my body. The questions came in a tidal wave, each one more agonizing than the last. Who was that woman? What was he doing here? Logan? The name echoed in my skull, a foreign poisonous sound. An affair was the simplest, most brutal answer. a double life, our entire marriage a lie. My secret shifts my aching feet, my shoebox full of cash. It all felt like a pathetic, cruel joke. I had been sacrificing for a man who was living a life of luxury behind my back. The steel door creaked open, spilling a rectangle of yellow light into the dark alley. Liam stepped out his tailored suit, looking absurdly out of place among the overflowing dumpsters. The panic was still etched on his face, but it was hardened now with a desperate urgency. He shut the door behind him, plunging us back into the semi-darkness. "Nora," he said, his voice low and strained. He took a step toward me. "Don't," I choked out, holding up a hand. The word was a shard of glass in my throat. "Don't you dare come near me." He stopped, his hands raised in a placating gesture. "Nora, please. You have to let me explain. It is not what you think it is." A laugh, raw and humorless, tore from my chest. "Not what I think. What else could it possibly be? Liam? Or should I call you Logan now? Does she like that name better?" The anger was a hot, cleansing fire, burning away the shock. "For months, I have watched you waste away on our sofa. I have paid our bills in secret because I thought you were too broken to function. I'm working in there." I jabbed a trembling finger toward the door, "serving people like you so we don't lose our home." His face contorted with a pain that for a moment looked genuine. "I know, Nora. I know you have, and I am so sorry you had to see this. I never wanted you to be involved." "Involved in what?" I screamed, the sound echoing off the brick walls. "Involved in your affair, your secret, rich life. Who is she? How long has this been going on? All those nights you were out for a walk to clear your head, were you with her?" "No, God, no. It's nothing like that," he insisted, stepping closer again, his eyes pleading. "Her name is Maya. She's a colleague. This is work." "Work?" I spat the word. "You told me you were laid off. You sat there and let me believe you had lost everything. We almost lost everything." "I had to," he said, his voice cracking. He finally closed the distance between us, grabbing my arms. His grip was firm, desperate. "Listen to me just for a second. I can't explain everything right now, right here. But you have to believe me. You are in danger if I do. We both are." His words were meant to be a lifeline, but they felt like the cruelest manipulation. He was twisting the knife, trying to scare me into silence. The smell of his expensive cologne, a scent I didn't recognize, filled my senses, making me feel nauseous. This wasn't my husband. This was a polished, lying stranger. I shoved him hard. He stumbled back, surprised by my strength. "Danger. The only danger here is you. You are a liar, Liam." "It's an undercover assignment." He blurted out the words, tumbling out in a rush. "I wasn't laid off. I'm an investigator. I'm trying to expose a massive fraud scheme at Sterling Financial. The man behind it is dangerous. I had to disappear. I had to look like a failure. It was the only way to protect you." The story was so outlandish, so utterly unbelievable, that it was more insulting than a simple confession. It was a coward's lie, a fantasy cooked up on the spot to cover his tracks. "An undercover investigator," I said, my voice dripping with scorn. "Is that what they're calling it these days? Stop it. Just stop lying to me." Tears were streaming down my face now, hot and angry. The man I had married was gone. The man in front of me was a stranger I didn't know, and a liar I couldn't trust. I looked at his desperate, pleading face, and I saw nothing but deceit. I turned my back on him and walked toward the end of the alley, away from the restaurant, away from him. My heart, a cold, heavy stone in my chest. The life I had been fighting for was a sham, and I had never felt so utterly, terrifyingly alone. I spent the night in a cheap motel on the outskirts of the city, the kind with flickering fluorescent lights and a persistent smell of disinfectant. Sleep was impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Liam's face, not the hollow mask of depression, but the vibrant, panicked expression from the restaurant. His wild story from the alley played on a loop in my head, each word sounding more preposterous than the last. An undercover investigator. It felt like a plot from one of the spy movies he used to love, a fantasy constructed to hide a sordid, ordinary betrayal. My phone buzzed relentlessly, with texts and calls from him, all of which I ignored. But then a message came from a number I didn't recognize. "This is Maya Singh. Please, Nora, for your own safety, you need to listen. Meet us, 10 a.m., 435 West Kinsey Street, apartment 12B. Come alone. Maya," the name of the woman from the restaurant. Part of me wanted to delete the message, to cut all ties, and never look back. But the mention of my safety, combined with the cold authority of the text, planted a seed of doubt in my rage. What if by some insane, impossible chance, he wasn't lying? The thought was terrifying in its own right. Against my better judgment, driven by a sliver of desperate hope that there was an explanation other than infidelity, I decided to go. The address led me to a sleek, anonymous high-rise in the West Loop. Apartment 12B was a corporate suite, sterile and impersonal, with minimalist furniture and a sweeping view of the city. Liam was there, looking haggard and exhausted. He had changed out of the suit and was back in jeans and a t-shirt, but the confident posture from the restaurant remained. He looked like a man carrying an immense weight. The woman, Maya Singh, stood by the window. In the daylight, without the soft glow of the gilded lantern, she was all sharp angles and sharper intelligence. The glamorous dress was gone, replaced by a practical pantsuit. Her hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and her expression was one of cool, detached professionalism. There was nothing about her that suggested mistress. She looked like an agent, a lawyer, a woman who got things done. "Thank you for coming, Nora," she said, her voice calm and even. "I know this is difficult to process." I stood by the door, my arms crossed, a fortress of skepticism. "I'm here to listen. That's it." Liam started to speak. "Nora, Maya held up a hand, silencing him. "Let me handle this." She gestured to the glass coffee table, where a single, thick file lay. "Liam wasn't laid off," she began, her tone direct, leaving no room for argument. "He's a senior investigator in Sterling Financial's Internal Affairs Division. For the last 6 months, he has been leading a covert operation, codenamed Project Nightingale." She slid the file across the table toward me. I opened it. The pages were filled with financial charts, timelines, and paragraphs of text, but most of it was blacked out with thick, redacted lines. It looked official. It looked serious. "A few years ago, the company noticed discrepancies in the employee pension fund," Maya continued. "Small at first, but growing. They brought in a forensic accounting team, but the trail always went cold. The system was being manipulated from the inside by someone with C-level access and an intimate knowledge of our security protocols. We knew who it was, but we couldn't prove it. The man is a ghost." She tapped a page in the file. One name circled in red was not blacked out: Garrett Monroe. The name hit me like a physical blow. Garrett Monroe was Sterling Financial's CFO. He was Liam's boss, a charismatic, silver-haired man we'd met at company Christmas parties. He'd once complimented my dress and asked Liam about our plans to start a family. Monroe. I whispered the name, tasting like poison. He siphoned over $90 million, Maya said, her voice dropping. He's robbing his own employees, people who have worked for the company their whole lives. But he's brilliant. He's insulated himself with layers of shell corporations and digital dead ends. The only way to get him was to get close to him to gain his trust. Liam finally spoke, his voice quiet but intense. Monroe preys on weakness, but he respects power and greed. The only way in was for me to become someone he'd want in his inner circle. So Liam Walsh, the loyal company man, had to be destroyed. I had to become Logan West, a disgraced but wealthy day trader looking for a place to park his illicit cash. The layoff was the first step. The depression, the financial ruin, it all had to look real. He has people watching. One slip up, and the entire operation would be blown. The pieces started to click into place, forming a picture that was both horrifying and sickeningly logical. The hollow man on the sofa, the secret late-night walks that were actually meetings, the blocked calls. It was all a performance, an elaborate, soul-crushing charade. "Why couldn't you tell me?" I asked, my voice trembling, the anger returning. But this time, it was laced with a cold, creeping fear. "Because Monroe is not just a white-collar criminal," Maya said, her eyes locking onto mine with chilling gravity. "The last person who got close to exposing him was an IT analyst named Ben Carter. A few months ago, he was killed in a car accident on the Eisenhower Expressway. State police found his brake lines had been expertly cut." She let the words hang in the air. "Liam insisted that you be kept completely out of it. Your lack of knowledge was your protection. If you didn't know anything, you couldn't be a target or a liability." I sank onto the edge of the sofa, my legs suddenly unable to support me. The file lay open in my lap, the black, redacted lines looking like bars on a cage. This wasn't about a broken heart anymore. It was about a broken life, someone else's. And now, thanks to a VIP seating at the Gilded Lantern, it was about ours. The abstract lie had become a terrifyingly concrete threat, and I was standing right in the middle of it. The sterile corporate apartment became our new reality. I didn't go home. Liam and Maya insisted it was too dangerous now that I was in the know. I called my clients and told them I had a family emergency, pushing back deadlines, and effectively shutting down my business for the foreseeable future. My life, the one I had so carefully compartmentalized, was now a single, terrifying stream of events I couldn't control. The anger at Liam's deception hadn't vanished, but it had been dwarfed by a gnawing anxiety for his safety. The man who came back to the apartment, late each night, shedding the slick persona of Logan West, was the real Liam again, stressed, exhausted, but fiercely focused. The distance between us was gone, replaced by a shared, silent terror. We spent hours going over the details of the investigation. As I listened, a memory surfaced, sharp and sudden. "Daniel Shaw," I said, my voice cutting through the quiet room. "The man I saw at the restaurant the other night. He was one of Liam's colleagues. He works directly under Monroe, doesn't he?" Liam and Maya exchanged a look. "He's Monroe's right-hand man," Liam confirmed. "Ambitious, loyal, and probably complicit. Why? He's a regular at the Gilded Lantern." I said, the idea forming even as I spoke. He comes in once or twice a week, usually with Monroe. They always take the same corner table. I looked from Liam to Maya, my resolve hardening. You need to know what they're saying. I can get close. I can listen. No one there knows me as Liam's wife. I'm just a waitress. Liam immediately shot the idea down. Absolutely not, Nora. It's too dangerous. You're out. That's the end of it. No, I insisted, my voice firmer than I expected. I'm already in. Monroe's people might already be looking into the waitress who caused a scene. The safest thing for me to do is go back. Act like nothing happened, like I was just overwhelmed. If I disappear, it looks suspicious. If I'm there, I can be your eyes and ears. The fear was a cold knot in my stomach, but the thought of sitting idly in this apartment while Liam walked into the lion's den was worse. I was done being a passive victim of his secret. Miles away in a penthouse office overlooking the city, Garrett Monroe swirled a tumbler of scotch, the amber liquid catching the afternoon light. The city was his kingdom, a collection of assets and liabilities to be managed. He was a man who prided himself on control, on anticipating every move. But for the past week, a small, irritating detail had been bothering him. The incident at the Gilded Lantern. His new associate, the flashy and aggressive Logan West, had handled it well enough, calming his rattled date and passing it off as a starstruck or mentally unstable waitress. But Monroe hadn't gotten to his position by ignoring his instincts. He picked up his phone and dialed his head of security, a former Mossad agent with a talent for discreet inquiries. Anything on that waitress from last Saturday? Nothing of note, the voice on the other end replied. Nora Walsh, no criminal record, a freelance graphic designer. Husband was laid off from Sterling a few months back. Seems clean. The husband? Monroe said, a flicker of interest in his eyes. Liam Walsh. He was in analytics, wasn't he? Yes, sir. Let go in the third quarter restructuring. By all accounts, he's been unemployed and depressed ever since. It all seemed to check out. A coincidence, a woman cracking under the stress of a husband's failure. And yet, it felt too neat. West's story is solid. Monroe mused aloud, more to himself than to the man on the phone. But I have a bad feeling. Have someone watch his wife. People get careless when they think their family is safe. I want to know where she goes, who she talks to, everything. He hung up the phone. It was a minor expense, an indulgence of his paranoia. But paranoia, he had found, was simply a heightened state of awareness. It had kept him safe for years. It had kept him rich. 2 nights later, I was back in my black uniform, my hands trembling as I polished wine glasses behind the bar. Every face in the crowd felt like a threat. When Garrett Monroe and Daniel Shaw walked in and took their usual corner booth, my heart leaped into my throat. This was it. I took a deep breath, grabbed a tray, and began clearing a recently vacated table adjacent to theirs. My movements were slow, deliberate. I kept my head down, focusing on stacking the plates, but my ears were straining to catch their conversation over the restaurant's din. The final transfer is scheduled for Friday, Monroe was saying, his voice a low, confident rumble. Once the funds clear the Cayman account, we can begin scrubbing the servers. And what about loose ends? Daniel asked, his voice tighter, more nervous. Monroe let out a soft, chilling laugh. There are no loose ends, Daniel. Only clean slates. He took a sip of his wine. West is handling the final transaction. He's proven to be a valuable, if unsubtle, asset. I stacked the last of the dirty glasses onto my tray, my mind racing. Friday, the final transfer. This was the information they needed. I had to get out of there. I straightened up, turning to leave, and my eyes met Garrett Monroe's. He was looking directly at me. There was no recognition in his gaze, no sign that he knew who I was. He gave me a polite, meaningless smile, the kind a man of his stature gives to the hired help, but his eyes were as cold and dead as a winter sky. They held no warmth, only a flat, calculating assessment. A chill of pure dread snaked down my spine. The smile didn't reach his eyes, and in that terrifying frozen moment, I was certain he knew. He knew I was listening. He knew I was more than just a waitress. The information I overheard lit a fire under the investigation. Friday, Liam repeated, pacing the floor of the corporate apartment. That's it. That's the end game. He's moving all the money. Maya was on the phone, speaking in clipped, urgent tones to a contact at the FBI. We have a window. Monroe is giving Logan a hard drive with the final account data at a celebratory dinner. He wants it off-site before he scrubs the servers. The transfer happens at midnight. The plan coalesced with terrifying speed. The celebratory dinner would be at the Gilded Lantern. It was Monroe's favorite spot, his home turf. He'd feel safe there. The FBI would move in a tactical team disguised as restaurant staff and patrons. My heart hammered against my ribs. I have to be there. I'm working my shift. I stated my voice, leaving no room for argument. Nora, no. Liam said, his face pale. It's too much after what happened. It's the only thing that makes sense, I countered, my fear hardening into resolve. Monroe saw me. If I don't show up for my shift on a busy Friday night, it raises a red flag. He might get spooked and call the whole thing off. I have to be there. I'll be the one constant, the one thing that makes him feel like it's just another night. Maya, after a moment of consideration, nodded slowly. She's right. Her presence provides a layer of normalcy. But you will do exactly as you're told, Nora. You're a ghost. You serve your tables, you stay away from Monroe, and when the signal is given, you get down. The hours leading up to the shift were the longest of my life. Liam and I sat in silence, the unspoken terror hanging between us. Before he left, to transform into Logan West, he pulled me close, his arms wrapping around me tightly. I am so sorry. I dragged you into this, he whispered into my hair. We're in it together, I whispered back, holding on to him, as if he might evaporate. Just come back. The restaurant was electric that night, but for me, the energy was one of pure dread. Every new face could be an FBI agent or one of Monroe's men. The new busboy, the couple at the bar, the sommelier I'd never seen before, they were all part of the deadly play. I moved through my section on autopilot, my smile feeling like a cheap mask. At 10 p.m., Garrett Monroe and Liam as Logan West arrived. They were shown to the corner booth, the same one where Monroe had plotted his crime, the same one where my life had fallen apart. Monroe was in his element, expansive and charming. Liam played his part perfectly, projecting an air of greedy, triumphant arrogance. I watched them from across the room, my stomach churning. The dinner dragged on. They drank expensive wine and ate lobster. To anyone else, it was a picture of success. To me, it was the final, tense moments before an explosion. As they finished their meal, Monroe slid a small, sleek hard drive across the table. As promised, he said with a predator's smile, your key to the kingdom. Liam took it, slipping it into his jacket pocket. To clean slates, he said, raising his glass. That was the signal. I saw a subtle nod from the man at the bar. The new sommelier straightened his tie, his hand drifting toward his jacket. But something went wrong. Monroe's bodyguard, a mountain of a man standing near the entrance, had a trained eye for this sort of thing. He caught the glint of a nearly invisible earpiece on an agent posing as a diner. His eyes widened. "Sir, we need to go now," he barked, grabbing Monroe's arm and shoving him toward the back exit, the same one I had fled through weeks before. Chaos erupted. The FBI agents began to move in shouting commands, but Monroe and his bodyguard were already halfway across the dining room. They were going to get away. Liam and Maya were blocked by a panicked crowd of diners diving for cover. Everything slowed down. I was standing near the service station, my hands loaded with a heavy silver tray of champagne flutes for a birthday party. Monroe's bodyguard was a battering ram, clearing a path. He was about to pass me. In a split second, a choice presented itself. I could follow Maya's order and get down, or I could do something. I didn't think. I acted pivoting on my heel with a dancer's grace I didn't know I possessed. I stumbled directly into the bodyguard's path. "Oh, I'm so sorry," I cried out, letting the heavy tray tilt. The effect was spectacular. 24 crystal flutes and 3 bottles of champagne met the man's chest and the marble floor in a symphony of shattering glass and exploding foam. He roared in surprise as the liquid soaked him, his expensive shoes slipping on the slick floor. He went down hard, his massive frame hitting the ground with a thud. The diversion lasted only 2 seconds, but it was all they needed. The path was clear. As Monroe fumbled with the handle of the emergency exit, Liam and Maya closed the distance. They apprehended him, slamming him against the door, just as he was about to push it open. I stood there frozen amidst the wreckage of shattered glass and glittering champagne, my heart pounding like a drum. Diners were screaming. Agents were cuffing a sputtering, furious Garrett Monroe. And Liam was looking across the chaotic room directly at me. His face was a mixture of shock terror and a profound, overwhelming gratitude. In that moment, surrounded by the debris of my own decisive action, I knew we were going to be okay. The ghost on my sofa was gone for good. My husband was back. The aftermath was a blur of flashing lights, sharp commands, and the quiet, efficient work of federal agents sweeping through the debris of the Gilded Lantern. I gave my statement in a daze, the adrenaline slowly draining away, leaving a deep, bone-weary exhaustion in its place. Liam and I were taken back to the corporate apartment, and for the first time in months, we slept. It was a deep, dreamless sleep, the kind that only comes after a long and terrible fever has broken. 3 months later, the sun streamed into the kitchen of our own apartment. The silence that had once been a suffocating blanket was now a comfortable, peaceful quiet. The ghost of Liam's depression was gone, banished by the harsh light of truth. He was leaner now, the hollows of his face filled out, and the light was back in his eyes for good. He was home. The story had dominated the news for weeks. A local TV station was replaying a segment on the case, and we watched it over coffee. There was Garrett Monroe, his charismatic facade crumbled, being led from a courthouse in handcuffs, his face a mask of impotent rage. The reporter detailed his conviction, 25 years in a federal prison, for fraud, racketeering, and conspiracy. The $90 million from the pension fund had been located and seized. The news report cut to an interview with a tearful retiree from Sterling Financial, a woman who said her life savings had been restored. "You did that," I said quietly, touching Liam's hand. "No," he said, turning my hand over and lacing his fingers with mine. We did that. A few weeks ago, a postcard had arrived from Washington, D.C. The picture was of the Lincoln Memorial. The message on the back was simple and direct, written in Maya Singh's neat, no-nonsense script. Commendation and a promotion. You did good, both of you. There was no signature. None was needed. Liam had resigned from Sterling Financial the day after Monroe's arrest. The life of secrets and deception was over. He had just accepted a new position as a senior consultant for a firm that specialized in preventing corporate fraud. It was a desk job, a safe, predictable 9-to-5 job. He slid 2 pieces of paper across the polished wood of our kitchen table. They were plane tickets, a nonstop flight from Chicago to Rome, departing in 2 weeks. A proper vacation, he said, his eyes watching me, searching for my reaction. No aliases, no secret meetings, just us. I promised myself that if we got through this, I would spend the rest of my life making sure you never had to doubt me again. No more secrets, Nora. I swear. I looked from the tickets to his earnest, open face. The last vestiges of my anger had long since faded, replaced by a love that was deeper and more resilient than before. Our marriage hadn't just survived. It had been forged into something stronger in the fire of his secret. We had seen the worst versions of our lives, both real and imagined, and we had found our way back to each other. My old waitress apron was hanging on a hook by the back door. I had kept it as a reminder of the lies, yes, but also of the strength I never knew I had. A reminder of the woman who held her world together with tips and sheer force of will. The woman who had faced down a monster with a tray of champagne. I picked up the plane tickets, the crisp paper cool against my fingertips. Italy. It was a world away from cold alleys and sterile apartments. It was a new beginning. Okay, I said, a slow, genuine smile spreading across my face. But I'm not serving you any wine. He laughed, a real unrestrained sound that filled the kitchen, chasing away the last of the shadows. He reached across the table, his hand covering mine. We just sat there for a moment, in the quiet, sunlit room, our shared gaze a silent promise of the peaceful, honest future we had fought for and won.